Welcome to the second ever episode of Dead Last, the show where we rank your favorite horror franchises. In this episode, we are covering something special. We are covering the Nightmare on Elm Street series. We're going to be ranking it from Dead Last all the way down to the first, the best. We have, some special guests actually going to be joining us in the ranking here, so let me introduce those guys to you first. First up, I guess most importantly, we have Christy, the Movie Timeline's wife. Christy actually is a costume designer for film and television when film and television existed before the shutdown. And actually she's been joining us here as the non-horror aficionado voice. We also have my man Mikey, special effects mask maker extraordinaire. Actually, I thought of something last night. There's a fun story about Mikey with regards to Nightmare on Elm Street because one of your Freddy designs was actually passed around on the internet as leaked effects, was it not?
Yeah, that kind of got me in trouble, actually. That was a total accident. It was a misunderstanding. I did some random design for Freddy before the remake, and people started throwing it around, and it was...
Man, I remember that.
Yeah. Let's see, we also have with us Derek, actually. Derek is from the Halloween Shindig blog and the Shindig Radio, which Shindig Radio is on Spotify, I believe.
Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. I never put it on Spotify. I don't know why. Maybe I should. Why not?
Yeah, you should. I mean, might as well. So the four of us have ranked all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, all 7 of them. Also the remake, and also Freddy vs. Jason. So that gives us 9 movies in total to rank up. I've also enlisted my patrons from patreon.com. These guys over here have helped us out by giving us their listings, and altogether there were 11 people contributing numbers. So a quick rundown of how this works. Everyone has given me their list, whatever movie that they had ranked dead last, in this case would be the 9th place movie, so it gets 9 points. Whatever movie they have ranked first, the best movie, would be 1 point. So now the movie obviously with the lowest number of points is the best, and the movie with the highest number of points is dead last, the worst of them. So let's talk about it, because I think that dead last in 9th place right here is not controversial at all, with 97 points. And let me point out that the highest maximum amount of points that a movie could get in this scenario is 99 points. And this got 97 points. And it is the 2010 remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. There was only one person, one of the patrons, that did not rank this movie as dead last. They actually ranked it as 7th. So there was 2 movies that they hated more than the remake. But everybody else ranked this as their least favorite Nightmare movie. Christy, we just watched this one last night, and you had a few choice words for it.
I mean, first of all, it does not feel like a Freddy movie at all. There's absolutely nothing fun about it. It's so overly dark. So dark. So these kids are being murdered by the person that molested them after they survived being molested. I mean, what?
Dark is not always a bad thing, but in this case it certainly was.
Yeah, it's just too much. I mean, especially for being a part of this franchise, it has a lot of fun elements to it. And then to all of a sudden, and then have a Freddy with obviously no personality except just a terrible person. It just doesn't fit.
It's all wrong. It's almost like it doesn't even belong, to that franchise in any way. Like the only thing is claws, a hat, and the title that even connects it for me to the entire, there was always a weird, vague implication that Freddy was kind of a pedophile or something like that. It was never really blatantly out there, at least, not that I caught. And in this one, to do that, I just thought it was unnecessary. It's that doesn't make it scarier. It just makes it kind of creepier and grosser, and you're not enjoying the character in any way. It's kind of weird to say I love Freddy Krueger because he's a child killer, but still, you love Freddy Krueger. He became this character that you're following. He's this icon. And it just kind of flushed that whole thing. You hate Freddy, you're grossed out by him, you're not entertained by him, and the movie's just a total flop.
It's not even that it's dark necessarily, which I mean it kind of is, but it's just drab. It's got no style, no personality. He's basically just Rorschach, which is weird.
Yeah.
And I think the reason it doesn't work, as opposed to something like Friday the 13th or Halloween, which those aren't great either, but you slap a mask that looks somewhat similar to the mask you're used to, and you have a hulking guy who's stammering around and murdering people, and you basically have the same movie. But with Freddy, it's different. He's a character. He has a personality. And the shift here from the Freddy you know and love, and what Jack Earl Haley, who I like Jack Earl Haley, but
yeah.
Whatever he's doing in that, which is essentially just kind of Rorschach-y and Batman-y, is like, what is this? I don't like this guy. I mean, it's actually closer to a remake than some of the others. I mean, they hit a lot of the beats, and the story is not that much different from the other remakes.
It's a Cliff version.
But it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like a bunch of kids like play acting like they're in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie instead of being a Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
You have this whole franchise that is in this weird dream world where you can do anything you want, and then to not use that at all, why would you even remake the movie if you weren't going to use it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Why does it even exist?
Yeah, I mean, even the first movie, which was probably the least over the top in terms of the dream sequences, but I mean, Freddy still had elongating arms. He would cut off parts of his body just to show off. He'd yank off his face and there was still creativity to the dreams, whereas in the remake, the dream sequences were literally just the boiler room. So that's it.
That's not even where he was taking the kids. So what difference does it matter with the boiler room? And right. He's not even a murderer.
Yeah.
Hey, you made him a pedophile, and that's weird and creepy.
And that's actually where I personally think they could have saved the movie in a way if they had got the balls for it and just had Freddy not have molested the kids and had the kids lie, and he was killed an innocent man and now was just killing these kids, and obviously that twisted him, turned him evil. That actually I feel like would have made the movie more distinctive and actually taken it somewhere more interesting. And if they would have run with that, maybe it could have been. I don't know if that would have saved it. Maybe it could have salvaged it, possibly.
It would give him a motivation to exist, to have come back. For you're just you have a person that you get to come back just to murder the people that you've tortured. I mean, that doesn't.
It would have been owning him as a hero too,
Yeah.
If they actually were no, we're gonna own it. We know everyone's watching this for Freddy anyway. Let's make him, a misunderstood good guy. It makes sense. I think the big problem though is it's not Robert Englund, because Robert Englund is Freddy. Anybody can don the Jason mask, but Robert Englund is. I mean, it's just him. Yeah. I don't have. It's not that I don't have any faith in Jack Earl Haley that he would have done a great Freddy if they had written him a great Freddy, but they just didn't do that. So he doesn't have any cool lines, and I don't need goofball one-liners, but I need a little bit of personality, and they don't even try,
So that takes us to the number 8. This one I don't think is as controversial as either. I think that this was probably a lot of people would think of this as last, but in 8th place with a total of 81 points is Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. Let's see. So one person so the person that did not rank the remake dead last ranked this one dead last. Its highest ranking that it got in total. 2 people gave it a 6. Mikey and Derek, both of you guys gave it a 7. You both gave it 7th place, so pretty low on your list. And Christy and I both gave it 8th.
Man, I wanted to come on here and defend the shit out of Freddy's Dead, but it had been a while since I watched it. We were having that text conversation. And I was like, hey, but isn't it still kind of... And then I rewatched it the other night, and
it's terrible.
So hard to defend that movie. That movie is such trash.
It's the height of Goofy Freddy. It's like the most Goofy Freddy that Goofy Freddy gets.
I mean, he's doing cartoon moves straight up, straight up, like you were saying, like Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers gags is what he's doing.
I'm gonna just be honest. 4, 5, and 6 are just like one continuous shit show to me. Like, it's really hard for watching these all for the first time and then watching them like in order. It's really hard for me to even separate, except
I can see that.
which one had like the dumbest shit.
Freddy's dead.
Yeah, so it's Freddy's dead.
Freddy's Dead is the one with the video game.
Yes, which is like, I don't even.
And let's not forget Roseanne Barr and Tom Arnold.
Which, you know, they're not bad necessarily. I don't know what they're doing there, but they're okay. But like the weird thing is, I sort of like the idea that they go to Springwood and he's kind of like, I don't know, created some sort of weird psychosis, hypnosis thing with Springwood, and there's no kids. Like, it's not a terrible idea. It's just like,
yeah, I mean, like that whole sequence in Springwood with like the adults at the carnival and everything like that and everyone's basically crazy because there's no kids. And I liked that whole concept, at least. It doesn't make sense in terms of like the continuity of the series and everything like that. But I mean, it works. Number 7 with 71 points is Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. So nobody ranked this one dead last. Its highest ranking that it got was 4th place. 4 people did rank it number 8. So this was 4 people's second least favorite of the series. Out of us, the panel the highest ranking it got was actually from you, Derek. You gave it 5th place. Me and Christy both gave it 6th place, and me and Mikey gave it 6th place, and Christy's the lowest. She gave it 7th place. And I just want to start off by saying that this is I know that I had this ranked in 6th place, but like I said, I think that when you talk about 4, 5, and 6 together, this one to me is the most redeemable. And it has nothing to do with the script, because the script for this movie is complete, total garbage. The story of this movie is terrible. The acting is all pretty terrible. The dream sequences are just ludicrous and over the top and silly. But it looks great.
yeah.
The cinematography of the movie, the set design of the movie, the whole gothic darkness of the movie looks really nice. And in terms of just a visual aspect, I thought it really had the dreams looked very dark and creepy, but also very surreal and dreamish. And that's the only thing that edges it above the other ones for me, and that's why I ranked it a little higher than the other ones. Even though I still think it's donkey balls.
I think that I think the original idea of Freddy was good enough. With having like the whole dream world to use, that I don't think they needed to go down another road where his mom was a nun raped by 100 people. Like, why?
Well, I mean, they start that off in Dream Warriors is when they first mentioned that.
Yeah.
But I don't need a whole movie on it.
Yeah.
They do, right? I mean, at this point, you got no Elm Street kids left. He can only get into their dreams through Alice because Kristen gave Alice the power. He's so far removed from anything that's going on. They're like, well, what do we do? They're like, make a baby. And just the baby's dreams. Well, what the hell, right? We're just making money hand over fist. Let's do it. But yeah, this is not a good movie. But I will say that it's still 80s. It, like Josh is saying, it still looks like a Freddy movie. It still is fun and interesting to look at. That's why I give it 5.
Yeah.
Because it still feels a part of that world as opposed to the later ones, which don't at all.
It does have cool effects. It has some cool dream sequences. I actually like the whole sanitarium nun scene, because you're hearing that from part 3 and you're like, what's that all about? And to see it, for me, especially as a kid, was really scary. Like, oh my God. And you see Robert Englund kind of like walk through that frame, and it's pretty awesome. But also baby Freddy, you know what I mean? Like, you give me a little baby Freddy puppet, like that's gonna just like takes you one notch above part 6 for me.
And can we just take a moment to point out, before I move on to the next number, can we just take a moment to point out that I'm in the dark void. Mikey's got horror movie posters going on behind him. Derek's got the horror movie like ensemble happening behind him. And Christy has this cuddly little lounge with like a fluffy pillow with like guacamole on him. Okay, so we're moving on to number 6 now. I want to make a note here that this is actually where everything started to get tight. For like the next 4 entries, everything was within just a couple points of each other. And this was every time that somebody was giving me a new list, these rankings were just switching all over the place here. So number 6, with 57 points, is Freddy vs. Jason.
Oh, thank God. If you were going to tell me that Freddy vs. Jason busted into the top 5, I was going to freak out.
Yeah, so here's how it is. So the lowest ranking that it got total was 8th place. And 2 people ranked it 8th place, and those were Derek and Mikey. The lowest score that it got beyond you guys was 6th place. The highest ranking it got was 3rd place. 2 people ranked it as their 3rd favorite. Christy, it was your 5th favorite, and I actually gave it my 4th favorite. Now, before we start talking about this, I will let's just focus in here because we did discuss this on the Friday the 13th one. So we're going to focus our talk about this in relation to how it relates to Freddy. So Derek and Mikey, what was it about this that stuck out?
I'll let you take
I've always hated Freddy vs. Jason since I saw it in the theater. And this was actually the 2nd time I ever watched it prior to seeing it in the theater. It's not an idea that I was all that invested in, back when they were them. And to see it finally realized I guess it's fine. And I guess it's kind of fun to see them fight. Ultimately, that final battle where it's kind of gory and bloody, and it's sort of fun to see them go at it, but it is not worth the rest of that movie to get there.
I didn't know people liked this movie so much. I thought everyone agreed with me that this was terrible, and honestly, on paper, I don't understand why it doesn't work, because if you sat down and pitched this whole movie to me scene by scene, I would kind of be on board, but it just doesn't work for me. Pinball dreams and all these like goofy little cartoony things that you're pulling out of the nightmare sequels and stuff like that just don't work at that time for me. That being said, I like the makeup, especially Freddy's stuff. I think he looks cool. He looks scary. There's some dialogue stuff that works, some that doesn't. But after that, I've a complete distaste now for that versus idea. Like, I don't want to see Ash versus Pinhead. I don't want to see any of this stuff anymore, and it's basically because of Freddy versus Jason.
It's not because of the Alien versus Predator? That
was a bad one, too.
Well, I feel like I need to sort of defend my 4 ranking. I saw this movie an opening night in the movie theater, and I can describe to you my exact experience. If I had to judge this movie based upon the first hour of the movie, it would be ranked probably very close to Freddy's Dead. Not as bad as the remake, but it's terrible. Yes. But I think the last half hour of this movie is so damn entertaining, and the fight is everything that I had wanted to see from these characters from the beginning. That I loved that whole bit so much that it balanced it out for me. Like, you can put that on right now and I'll watch it. If you put on the beginning of that movie right now, I'll be like, I'll be back in an hour.
No, for sure.
They're pulling little things that you want to see, like the Freddy worm. Like, that's something, if I was going to make any Freddy connected thing now, I would have to connect a Freddy snake or a Freddy worm or a Freddy something, and they did it. But it's this kind of like not well polished CG version of that thing that I just hate. And if you're pointing back at some cool 80s rubber monster shit, give me cool 80s rubber monster shit,
All right, so let's move on to number 5. Number 5 is really interesting. We have a tie. 2 movies got 54 points each.
Whoa, that's weird.
And those movies are Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, and Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. So in order to figure out which one is going to be number 5 and which one is number 4, I have my friend George, and he's going to actually be the tiebreaker.
Hello. I have been brought in as an official authority to bring an end to the conflict of Which is the superior film? A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 or 4? After great deliberation, the results are in. And the winner is 2.
Which makes number 5, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. So it got.
With that.
Yeah.
George.
I'm very happy about that, as we'll talk about here. This movie's lowest ranking that it got was 7th place. 2 people ranked at 7th place, and I was one of them. The highest ranking it got was 3rd place. 2 people ranked this as their 3rd favorite Nightmare movie.
I can
Wait,
see that.
4 as their 3rd favorite?
Yeah. Derek ranked it as his 4th favorite, Mikey the 5th, and Christy 6th favorite. I'm going to start this off because I ranked this movie really low because I hate this one. It's like between 4, 5, and 6. It was like, obviously I think Freddy's Dead is the worst of them, but man, I really, really don't like the Dream Master. I really think that like the reason why it did so well on this ranking is I think a lot of people have like nostalgia memories. I think that Part 4 is a lot of people's first Nightmare movie. It made the most money, except for until you got to like Freddy vs. Jason and stuff like that, when it started to get into like the inflation years, and that helped it. But it was the highest grossing Nightmare movie at the time, and it was the one that got the most publicity, the most hype. I mean, it was like the first probably breakthrough mainstream Freddy movie, so I think a lot of people remember it more. But when you watch it, like, oh my, it's so cheesy to me. It's the corniest.
But more than 5 and 6?
Yeah. No, not more than 6 because I ranked 6. I ranked 6 as 8th place. But here's the thing.
5 is a little bit more. Yeah, I give you that.
See, here's the thing. Script-wise, 4 and 5 feel like the same movie to me. They're both the same level of garbage. 5 just had the aesthetics to it that made it feel darker and more dreamish. That 4, it's Rennie Harlan. I mean, it just was like, set up a camera, okay, go.
I can't remember which. They are really similar movies. They feel very similar, and it is the spot where I think that Freddy loses a lot of interest because once the Dream Warriors are dead and the original Elm Street kids are gone, the whole series just kind of falls in on itself.
Yeah.
And that's a point. And I do like the first half of Dream Master more than the second half. Once Kristen dies, I'm like, I don't care.
That one, though, to me is like the first official sequel in my head because I feel like Freddy is becoming Freddy through the first 3 movies.
Yeah.
Dream Warriors, he becomes what Freddy actually is. Like the first time he is presented as what Freddy is fleshed out to be.
Sure.
And then Part 4 is the first official sequel. To me, it's like it's trying pretty hard, and it at least gives you, cool dreams. The kids, even though they're not connected story-wise, doesn't really make any sense. The kids are total 80s movie slasher fodder in a very fun way to me.
Yeah.
Very 80s and goofy. And you put that with the cool special effects because I love the special effects in that one. All the makeup, the roach girl that we keep talking about. That's so awesome and so fun how it ends up with the goose splurting out of the little roach motel. I mean, I love that, and it might be a lot of nostalgia, but Screaming Mad George, puppet arms and stuff like that. I mean, that's what I want to see out of those movies, and in a very superficial goofball sequel kind of way, it's hitting all those marks for me. But yeah, again, not a good movie, by any stretch, really.
Yeah.
When she turns into the roach, it has one of the coolest dream sequences in any of the Nightmare movies, and it's when Alice and Dan are getting into the truck, and they take off.
The time loop is great.
They keep looping back around while all these crazy special effects are happening with the cockroach and her arms, and the arms are just shattering at the elbows. Meanwhile, they're in this continuous loop, which feels weird and dreamlike. And it's kind of trippy, and it takes you back. You're, whoa, what's going on here? And that whole sequence is one of the cooler sequences, I think, in all the Elm Street sequels.
But like, I wish they would have, like, having the dream world in front of you. I wish they would have done more things like the loops, or more weird things of like you can't get to people, or you can't, that's like dreams that people actually have. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
I wish they would have explored that more instead of, you know, turning people into cockroaches or, you know, computer games or motorcycles and all this other stuff. I wish they would have
Sucking the air out of them because they have asthma or something to that effect.
There's a lack of that in the whole series, really. Like, never at any point do they really tap into, like, well, what kind of dreams do people really have? And, you know, how can we, like, play with that in a real kind of visceral way? But
let's not discount the Fat Boys here either in terms of why that movie was so popular and why it's such a great movie and why it should definitely be. What is it ranking with everyone?
That is fifth place.
Fifth? I can live with fifth. I gave it fourth, but still, the Fat Boys, Are You Ready for Freddy is a great song.
So my advice to you is to stay ready, 'cause you know who's back? Freddy.
Well, then that takes us to the actual number 4, which, again, was tied, but the tiebreaker has ruled it to be better. So number 4 is Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. So this movie, with 54 points, its lowest ranking was 8th place. One person said that this was their second to least favorite Nightmare movie. The highest ranking that it got was number 2, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Mikey, you gave this number 3. Christy, you gave it 4th place. I gave it 5th place, although I just want to clarify really quick that I gave this 5th place, and my 6th place was, how was my 6th place? Dream Child. But the difference between 5th place and 6th place is like, huge. Because I actually really like Freddy's Revenge. But not as much as Derek, who was the person that ranked it 2nd place. Derek, you love this.
I do love Freddy's Revenge, and I don't know. I don't know if it's always for legitimate reasons. I mean, it's certainly one of my favorite, or at least one of my most favorites to watch as an enjoyable movie. And it's batshit. It has nothing to do with the original Elm Street. Freddy's powers are weird and dubious at best. Like, how is he even doing what he's doing? It's not connected. It's completely outside of the rest of the series. But you're getting a Freddy that you're not getting from then on. And I think if you like the original Elm Street, this is the closest you're getting to that Freddy. And in terms of a look, a feel, him being just sinister and evil, I don't think you're getting that kind of a Freddy again.
I do have to tell you that Grady is my favorite character of the entire franchise.
Oh, dude, he's great. Thrashing.
Yeah, but what do you love most? What's your favorite Grady scene, Christy?
That he did an entire scene with his mouth full of food. Not one line. The entire scene. Talk with your mouth full, make it real. And he's like, I'll just keep it going.
Well, and obviously this movie has taken on a new life of its own, too. I think that this is one that, when it came out, was hated. But I think that it's been, like, discovered and rediscovered as being, like, number one, as obviously being, like, a movie about homosexuality and kind of having this alternate message about, like, it's kind of weird because I feel like it's being embraced as a movie about... like embracing being gay, but I think if you go by the ending, it's like if Freddy is like the gayness, it's like, look, you can be cured by the love of a good woman.
You can be straight. Don't worry about it.
You just gotta put the gay guy in the boiler room. Yeah, Mikey, you gave this your third favorite, so you obviously really love this as well too.
Yeah, I do love this movie. It seems like it kind of came too early. Like, it doesn't seem like a direct sequel to the first movie. It seems like this is something that Freddy would become later when they couldn't really figure out what Freddy was after so many sequels. But right after that first movie, they jump into something completely different. It doesn't really fall in like kind of like the lore of the first film. But there's little things I like about it, which I think are reasons why a lot of people didn't like it. And I think the like homoerotic thing comes from just who Freddy is. Like, when he's tormenting a specific, victim, there's a weird sexual element. He has that going on with Nancy in the first movie too. So instead of, because we've seen this just in the whole genre at this time, we've seen these women tormented by this killer so many times. Let's have this supernatural dream killer torment a young guy now, and then still bring all those elements with it. And then it's just inherently homoerotic because of that. Like I don't think it should necessarily be like a commentary about homosexuality. That's just what comes with the territory that they are taking from the original. Where it is different though is he's like the most mean, gnarly Freddy, like Derek was saying. Like he's scary as hell. And I don't know how he manifests at that little pool party. I don't understand the logistics there. But when he shows up, he's one of the coolest Freddys you get in the whole series. He's scary, badass. There's fire and random shit blowing up. It doesn't really make any sense. But I think the real star for me, and that's where I rank a lot of these, are the effects. Like Mark Shostrom, badass effects. You're taking a lot of things you just saw in the first movie, like the face rip. Now you're getting the brain rip. You see the wall stretch. Now you're getting the actual body stretch. Like, there's all these cool things that go along with it, and they're top-notch makeup effects. And that resonates with me. That just that's basically where my whole list comes from. At the end of the day, that's
great effects. Makes sense.
I agree with Mikey. What like Freddy is actually scary. I felt like the first three, at least for me, are the only three where Freddy's scary. And it like you mentioning the pool party, that whole scene. There's there's a feeling of no escape, which. The first nightmare was the only nightmare I had seen like in real time, and that whole idea of not being able to wake up and not being able to escape your dream and being killed was terrifying to me as a kid. And it's just such a cool idea. And then to have it, I had that feeling for like the whole pool party thing, as silly as it is. I just wish they would have kept that all the way through the franchise, because I don't know, that's what made it scary. And then it just got silly from 4, 5, and 6 on.
I love Freddy's Revenge. I love Freddy's Revenge.
Well, on that note, we're now entering the top 3. When I first said we're going to do a nightmare listing, I figured that this top 3 would be pretty uncontroversial, and it's kind of coming out to be pretty much what I thought. But number 3, 46 points, is Wes Craven's New Nightmare, otherwise known as Nightmare on Elm Street Part 7. Its lowest ranking that it got was number 8. One person gave this 8. Its highest ranking that it got, one person did rank it as their number 2. So one person out there did rank this as their second place. Its lowest ranking out of the 4 of us was Derek, who gave it 6th place. Mikey, you gave it 4th place, which is pretty respectable, and Christy and I both gave it 3rd place. So again, Christy's ranking is pretty much right with everybody, because she's the ringer. But Derek, what is it about this one that you particularly don't like?
It's so hard to talk about because I think it's objectively a much better movie than any of the sequels. And that's why I'm saying it's so hard to rank, Freddy's Dead as being better than New Nightmare, because it's not. I mean, 5's not better than New Nightmare. 4's not better than New Nightmare. Arguably, 2 is not better than New Nightmare. But I just don't like it that much. It doesn't feel like a Freddy movie to me. It's not in that world. And the first half of the movie, which is admittedly pretty interesting, it's all focused on Nancy, and you're not getting really any Freddy. And then when you do get Freddy at the end, he's not that cool. He looks silly. He's got a weird makeup. I like the eyes. The eyes are okay. I hate that glove. I hate the whole end dream sequence.
I do hate that.
In that, I don't know. It's like a hellish boiler room where they just shove him into the fire and he's dead and he's doing stupid stuff and his tongue's coming out and it gets stabbed. I don't know. It just doesn't feel much like a Nightmare on Elm Street film to me.
See, for me, this one is the opposite of Freddy vs. Jason, because I love like the first hour and like 10 minutes of this movie. I think it's fantastic. I think it like took the concept, because I mean you have to go in a somewhat different direction with Freddy, because number one, the character was dead at this point, and also it had been kind of like worn out to the point of being silly. So I loved where they took it, like the concept of like the real world script, and that Freddy was an actual character crossing over into the real world. I loved all that stuff, and then it's just like in the last 15 or 20 minutes, they're just like, it's a Freddy movie. All right, now it's just a regular Freddy movie.
I love the beginning, I guess. I love everything until the babysitter dies in the hospital, and then it's just crap, because that made no sense, because she was awake. I still don't understand how that happened. And then the kid running across the highway and the big...
I guess he's out now. He's out in the real world at that point, right?
Yeah, I know.
It's very unclear.
It's very unclear. It's weird.
I do like that babysitter murder, because you're getting a callback to Tina's murder in the first one, but you get to see Freddy dragging her, which I think is really neat. It's one of the sequences about New Nightmare that I actually like a lot.
He doesn't follow the rules of the series so far, so it's very clear that he obviously can stretch over into the real world.
You can even argue that it's not Freddy.
No, it's not. It's not Freddy.
Just that demon. It's just that evil energy source or whatever that has been locked into the movie by Wes Craven for that long, that's out now, sort of taking the form of Freddy. But I mean, that's part of why I don't really like it, because it's like it's not really even Freddy.
Well, no, it's actually that other demon thing that we get to see in the very ending in that really, really good special effect. It's actually very, very well done.
You like that one? How's that one, Mikey? Is that one good for you?
No, see, that's my problem with New Nightmare, and I'm actually really surprised that it's ranked this high. I honestly thought that was one of the least favorite, with people, but I guess I was wrong. But it's the only one that doesn't really fit into my weird rubber effects criteria that I'm like, oh, that's what really kind of like notches it into place. Because I hate everything that has to do with Freddy in this movie. Like every time you see him, with a few exceptions, coming out of the sheet's pretty cool. I do like when he kills, the babysitter in that scene. It's the only real scary part of the entire movie. I think the real genius is just in the writing. The idea of you're taking this character that fear just feeds all his power, even outside this cinematic world that he was created for. And to me, that's genius, and it's never really been done properly. Like, you're taking it and you're just kind of like putting it in the real world, and I like that. I like the idea that now Nancy herself, or Heather, that plays Nancy, is a mother now, so she has to go through all the things, having a vulnerable child to now protect from the thing that she was afraid of in this movie. And on top of it, even the claw, the idea of the glove not being a glove but being this weird like biomech claw, like the original artwork in the poster, it's just an interesting little choice and thing to do. I don't think anything is really, like, at least visually, is executed that well, but the ideas and the concepts are so solid and smart that it's like, I think it's just that's what really makes it interesting,
Well, so let's talk about a movie where there are a lot of dreams happening. Let's talk about number 2, the number 2 ranked movie. I think that this one should come as no surprise, but this is a huge jump again. We had a big jump in points before, but I want to point out that New Nightmare was number 3 with 46 points, and with 21 points, second place goes to Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Its lowest ranking that it got out of anybody was third place. Only 2 people gave it third place. Derek, you were one of them. The highest ranking it got, 3 people ranked it number 1.
I'll buy that.
Yeah, and then me, Mikey, and Christy all ranked it as second place. And again, Christy just nailing every single one of these rankings. But yeah, this was a lot of people's second favorite movie. Some people said it was the first favorite, and other people said it was their third favorite. But everyone ranked this movie very high, and for very good reason. This is just a great 80s horror flick.
Feels like the sequel.
Yeah.
Like, Nancy makes sense, bringing her back. I don't know. I just really liked it.
Yeah, it definitely brought back more elements, because, I mean, not only you got Nancy comes back, you have John Saxon comes back. So it's like there are additional things that they're bringing back from that first movie. Obviously, the dreams are back, which kind of went away in the second one, and now you got them back again. I think for me, it introduced the concept of the Dream Warriors and the whole expanding the whole notion of like, hey, you can control your dreams. So let's do some weird stuff with it. It created such a great wrinkle that like no director afterwards really followed up with. I mean, even here, it was like slightly less imaginative because it's kind of like, hey, you can do anything you want in your dreams. What do you want to do? I want to be an all-powerful wizard. I want to have magic power. What do you want to do? I want to have superhuman strength and be able to rip things apart. How about you? Good at gymnastics?
I got a mohawk.
Yeah.
And switchblades.
And switchblades.
That is like 80s. That's like
For
exactly
sure.
what it would be, you know?
That's the best part of the movie too, is the fact that all of these characters are so quintessential, perfect 80s characters, and I think that's where the love really comes from. It's like you love each character. It feels so 80s. It's a perfect little time capsule. Even with the effects and stuff like that, you got Freddy Snake, which is probably my favorite sequence in the entire series. I mean, I'm obsessed with that. You know, it's just so awesome. And Freddy's becoming himself now. He's getting these one-liners and this goofy stuff, but it's still scary enough that it's not so over-the-top, tongue-in-cheek goofball that you're annoyed by it.
It makes good on the promise of Wes Craven's original Nightmare on Elm Street, where you have the Elm Street kids. They're all being affected by Freddy. They're all having these simultaneous dreams about the same character. Well, what happens when they are all in the same place and you have a person who now can pull them into their dreams and they can fight them in that plane? And I think when you're talking about the original idea of Freddy Krueger and, you know, a guy who can invade your dreams, I think that's the natural progression of it. It definitely makes way more sense as a sequel than Freddy's Revenge, as much as I love Freddy's Revenge. Like, if somebody said this was their second favorite or favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I could not fault them for that at all. I love Dream Warriors.
Although I will call it out, because if we're talking about the effects, because the effects are, for the most part, are pretty damn good, except maybe for stop-motion skeleton Freddy, which...
I like the Harryhausen skeleton battle in
I
this.
love it. I love it.
It does not... It's so glaringly bad when most of the other effects, like some of the effects in that movie, hold up really, really well. And then that one just looks like a cartoon.
My favorite is Philip's death when the veins coming out and turn into the marionette strings, the marionette Freddy puppet that comes to life and jumps down. Yeah. The way his foot looks with the tendon ripping out of it, it's awesome. That's a great dream sequence.
It's one of the more disturbing sequences. And that brings us to number one, the top of the heap, the best movie on this list. And this is actually, I want to point out that the points here are pretty amazing. The lowest possible score that a movie could have gotten on this list is 11. And with a total of 14 points, the number one movie is the original Nightmare on Elm Street. The lowest ranking it got was number 2, second place. Only 3 people listed it as second place. Those are the people that like Dream Warriors better. 8 people ranked it as first place, and all 4 of us ranked it as first place. So this was all of our favorite Nightmare movie here, and I think it's for a good reason.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not for nothing you get an entire, brand that comes out of this movie and this guy and this character. It's a great movie. It's a great 80s horror movie. It's a great horror movie, period. I love A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'm glad to see that I'm not alone in that, that everybody seems to agree.
No, and I mean, it's and especially when you take it, what was going on at the time. I mean, it was basically very similar to things that were coming out, but it was just such a different take on everything else that was out. Because, it was a slasher movie, but it was a slasher movie in dreams with these bizarre dream sequences and all this great other stuff happening that just made it wasn't your Friday the 13th. It wasn't your Michael Myers. It wasn't any of these like camp slashers. It was fresh, but it wasn't so fresh that it was just like, what's that? I mean, it was still a slasher, but it was just a really unique take on it. And it's just awesome.
you guys agree too that Freddy Krueger's like the Mickey Mouse of horror icons? I mean, he's the top of the pyramid, if you ask me. Like he's no, I don't think anything else has really affected, at least definitely from that time period, has really affected pop culture the way Freddy has. And that definitely is a big deal, just character wise. But even beyond that, it's like it's hard to look at that first movie without the whole series and franchise behind it. Yeah. And if you try to do that and isolate it, I think it's like it makes it seem even more genius, because if that was a standalone movie, like, we've talked about this before, like if you went back and watched Nightmare on Elm Street and it was just this obscure VHS tape that not a lot of people knew about, like a hack-a-lantern or something like that, you'd go back and watch that and your mind would be blown. Like, what is this? This is total genius. But it just happened to spawn this entire massive, international franchise, that even if you've never seen the movie, you know who Freddy Krueger is.
Nancy says it in New Nightmare. She's like, kids who haven't even seen the movies know who Freddy is,
Exactly.
Well, and that's an interesting thing too, because I mean, a lot of this is on YouTube, and a lot of YouTube viewers are younger, and I think that growing up in the 80s, like I think that a lot of people nowadays don't realize how big Freddy was. Like, Freddy was huge. I mean, he still has like that name brand recognition. But Freddy was giant. He was like Mickey Mouse. He was that well known by like everybody. Obviously, like his celebrity has fallen in the past like 10, 15 years, but people still know who he is, but just not to that level. But he was huge.
You still cannot wear a red and green sweater without somebody calling you Freddy. I mean,
it is such a great change to the way horror is. You don't see slashers really having that many supernatural elements until until A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
And then after that, everything's kind of weird. Even Friday, you get the psychics and he's raising from the dead and weird toxic babies. You're like, it's very influenced by A Nightmare on Elm Street, as everything was after that.
In comparison and contrast with the remake, because Christy and I just rewatched the remake like 2 nights ago, and one of the things that stood out was when you watch the original movie, they do kind of give you that fake out that Tina is the main character, sorta, because the beginning of the movie tends to focus more on her until she obviously dies. But in a sharp contrast to the remake, because the remake tried to do the same thing. They tried to make you think that the Chris character was the main character, and Nancy was like a side character. But in the first movie, even though they made you think that Tina was the main character, you still kind of knew who Nancy was. She was introduced. So when the movie kind of became about her, it made sense. In the remake, it didn't, because it was just like Nancy was this side character, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh, hey, remember this girl we showed you in the beginning? She's the main character now. And it's like in the first movie, that worked so well, because you were invested in Tina in the beginning, and then like, 15, 20 minutes in, she's like horribly murdered, and it's like, oh, she's not the main character. We got you.
That's the one of the inherent problems with remakes is you have to be able to reference the original, or else you don't get things. Like, you're not even going to be thinking about Nancy unless you know Nancy is your main character from the original movie. So that's why the movie can't stand alone unless you have that original, and it always screws something up. It's never done perfectly.
Well, I guess that wraps it up. So there you go. So you know now which Nightmare is the best, and you know which one is dead last. And I think that this list is, I think looking at this list, even though not everything on here is where I would have placed it, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, here's the list right here. So we'll just recap really quick. In dead last was the remake of the original film. Part 8 was Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. Part 7, The Dream Child. Part 6, Freddy vs. Jason. Part 5, The Dream Master. Number 4, Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. Third place is The New Nightmare. Second place, Dream Warriors. And in first place, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. I think that's a pretty solid list. I mean, I think that kind of cements things. But I will tell you that, if you think differently, you should put it down in the comments down below and let us know what you think differently. And if you want to contribute to future episodes of Dead Last, You can by being a patron on Patreon.com. The patrons are asked to send in a list whenever we do these, and they can contribute. These guys here are actually patrons that did contribute to this list, and I want to thank these guys for sending me your rankings. Great stuff, guys. Thank you for participating. And I also want to thank Christy, I want to thank Mikey, and I want to thank Derek for participating in this episode of Dead Last.
Not a problem.
And we'll see you very shortly. I don't have a set schedule for these next, but there will be another episode of Dead Last coming pretty soon. And thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you guys very soon.